There are so many fitness franchises out there for us. So we got a lot to cover. We want to learn about, why you guys are different and the whole bit. But I
Sure.
think you have a unique background that led you to franchising. So let's start with, you were a franchisee?
Yeah. Well, first, I think the most unique is I'm the son of a franchisor.
Oh, we got to
So I
talk
kind
about
of,
that because, all right, you're very, very unique. There are very, very few people I know out there that are part of that family of franchising. So let's go back in time. Let's talk about how you got involved and your dad.
yeah. So he was a investment, basically did private investments, and a client brought him the business plan for a local franchise. It was called Express Oil Change. And the more Ricky, my dad looked into it, really, he got excited about it. And the client ended up backing out. He said, well, if you're not going to do it, I'd like to do it. So he became a franchisee of Express Oil Change, then went on to open and own 13 of them, and then bought the company in 96. So in 96, I was off at college. And so that's when he moved from franchisee to franchisor. And so I kind of grew up around franchising, was very familiar with it. And so when I got out of Auburn, studied exercise science, was trying to figure out what in the world to do as a personal trainer to make money and not trade time for money and actually build something that would last more than just, my own sweat. I knew I had to open my own thing, but I had no idea how to do it. And I stumbled across an ad for Fitness Together, which was a
Okay.
franchise out of Denver, Colorado. And I thought, interesting. I didn't know anybody was franchising in the personal training space. And so I ran it by Ricky. He gave me about 4 pages of questions to ask when I went out there. And so I flew out and liked what I saw and became the first franchisee of Fitness Together in the Southeast, June of 2001, at the ripe old age of 24 years old.
Wow. Okay. So as if it's not dramatic enough that you are a second generation franchise person in your family, but were you the first franchisee you said in with Fitness Together?
No, I think I was unit like 12 or 13. I mean, I was pretty early, but there was none in the Southeast. They were all Midwest, West Coast type thing.
And
Northeast or
you're
some of the Northeast.
24 years old. I would normally say you don't know what you don't know. However, you did have a dad that was a franchisor. So how did that help?
Well, in a couple of ways. One, I opened it with a partner. We were both training in a local gym. We went in together on it. But Ricky was clearly our money. He co-signed with the bank and he said, guys, if this goes under, you work for me. And, to talk to him now, he thought it was just going to be a learning lesson for us, but we did. We
Oh,
made it work. But I think the biggest thing I learned was my entire life I had studied exercise. I'd studied it at school. I read everything Arnold ever put out. Like I was locked in on personal training. And Rick Sikorsky, the founder and CEO of Fitness Together, gave me the E-Myth when I opened that first location. And if your listeners have not read the E-Myth, it's one of those few books that I revisit probably once a year. Just I think it's timeless. But what he told me was, he said, Forrest, up to this point in your life, you've been the personal trainer. Now you are the marketer and salesman of personal training services, and never underestimate the difference. And so what I learned when I opened that studio is there was all these roles that I didn't know how to do: marketing, sales, finance, HR. And I was real comfortable on the floor training, but if I knew if I was going to grow and open multiple locations, which we ended up doing, that I would have to get off the floor, stop being the product, and really learn the business side of the business. And it just turns out that I really enjoy the business side. So I didn't know that. Never studied business. I was never one of those guys who was an aspiring entrepreneur from as long as I can remember. That was not my story. I just followed my passion and ended up in business.
wow. So you were introduced to the E-Myth at 24 years old?
Yes,
That
it was
book had
pretty new at that time
oh
too.
my gosh, yeah. E-Myth had a profound impact on my life. And I'll save that for another time. But yeah, I couldn't imagine having access to that material as a 24-year-old. That's just absolutely amazing. Tell me, so at 24 years old, you're realizing now that this is not about fitness. This is about sales and marketing, operations, finance, technology, all those things. How did that impact you?
Well, first of all, when we did site selection, Rick was the consummate salesman, and he took me and my partner Aaron to dinner, and he laid out a map of Birmingham. We'd spent all day driving around Birmingham. Where we're going to open this first one? Where we're going to open this first one? And he said, guys, you're going to open the first one right here. You're going to open the second one here in 6 months, and you're going to open the third one here 6 months later. And my eyes were as big as the plates on the table. Like, what? I just wanted to open my own studio. And now you're putting this multi-unit dream in my head. And we hit it to the day because he laid it out there. And so in order for us to do that, I knew I couldn't be the trainer on the floor. I had to be, negotiating leases and, all the things that goes into getting these things open. But yes, marketing was a big part of that as well.
Did it feel like too much pressure for you as a 24-year-old?
I mean, there were moments when I wanted to burn it all down. I mean, not long after we opened, it was June of 01. So 3 months later was 9/11. And I didn't think people were ever going to work out again. I mean, my studio literally stopped, and I had already signed the lease on location number 2. So yeah, there's been, and then, I just come off 08 and, trying to sell high priced personal training in 08. I'm sorry, not just come off 08. Then we go, I'm thinking that was right before Iron Tribe was 08. But yeah, in Fitness Together, we went through so many peaks and valleys. Just, yeah, there were times when I was like, why did I choose probably the hardest thing to do? No one wants to get in shape, especially in Birmingham, Alabama.
So how long were you a franchisee for?
So I ended up opening 6 Fitness Togethers in Birmingham. Then I bought the rights to Alabama, Florida, North Carolina, became a master franchisee, grew that to 55 locations in my 3 states. And then I sold all that back to Fitness Together in early 2010 to open Iron Tribe.
Okay. So the obvious question is, how in the world were you able to do that, being a franchisee in a fitness franchise and able to start your own franchise company?
Yeah, so we were 100% focused on one-on-one personal training in private rooms. And it was very high touch, high focus. And I really wanted to go more to a group model. And so I was on the advisory council. I was really pushing Fitness Together to go group. They didn't want to go group. And they also wanted my territory back. So I said, well, I'd like to start over and create a group model. And I know you want my territory back. So we basically did a trade. They gave me the rights to go get started.
Wow. So they saw it not as a competitive business then. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah, because it was a completely different model.
As the difference only being personal training versus group?
Yes.
Wow. That's unique. That is very, very unique. I'm very surprised to hear that. That's great for you. Mm-hmm. Do you think they regretted making that decision?
I think probably. Now I don't know. I mean, but maybe immediately afterwards they might have.
Yeah, I mean, you're creating a beast now with Iron Tribe. So let's move on over to Iron Tribe Fitness. So when do you start that company?
Yeah, so it was in 10, right after I sold all my Fitness Togethers back. And, what's interesting, I've now had experience as a franchisee and a master franchisee. So moving into that franchisor role, I thought would be pretty seamless. And so my goal was, because I didn't have a prototype, so I had to open one first. And then I had learned from my Fitness Together days that most investors don't get real excited about one gym. Mm-hmm. They want to see what you can do with scale. And so most of my franchisees were multi-unit, going into markets where they could build multiple locations. And so I knew I needed to establish the prototype for that. So we did that in Birmingham. We opened up 4 gyms in 2 years, from 10 to 12. And then I launched the franchise model in April of 12.
And your fitness model is unique. I know I opened the podcast by saying I want to hear how it's so different. It is. Let's talk about this semi-private group training that you guys do.
Yeah, we run a couple of different, what we call streams of programs. We do run a large group model, but we also run a semi-private personal training model. And what's interesting is I've seen pretty much the whole gamut. I've been in fitness now since 98. So I've seen a lot of fads come and go. When I first got started, pretty much everyone did one-on-one training. And it's good, and there's still a space for it, but it's super expensive. And most people don't need that high touch of service day in and day out. They don't need literally someone standing there counting their reps. And what happens as the coach is a lot of times you become more of a therapist than anything, because you don't want to say squeeze your biceps for the 800th time. And so you just start talking. So anyway, on group, it's almost the other end of that extreme. You can get lost in the group. You don't get as much individualization. If you've got a shoulder injury, it's hard to customize when you're handling, up to 20, 30 other people. What's great about group is, but there's camaraderie, there's competition, there's accountability, not just with your coach, but other people in your class. And so there's great things about group. There's great things about one-on-one. What semi-private does is it really blends those two worlds where you can still get the camaraderie, you can still get the accountability, but you can also get the customization inside of the group. And it's a bit better value proposition for the customer because they don't have to pay the one-on-one rates. So it's really a good sweet spot for us, and we've enjoyed that program a lot.
Forrest, is that putting a much greater emphasis then on the quality of your trainers than another fitness franchise?
100%. I mean, our number one differentiator is not our programs, it's our people.
Oh,
and
okay.
we are able to offer full-time career opportunities. I've got a whole slew of coaches who've been with me 7 years longer, some 10 years and longer. Because of the way we structure it, we can pay them what they're worth. We can give them, real jobs, 401ks, and vacations and insurance and all this type of stuff, which is, that sounds basic, but in the fitness industry, that it's hard for these guys to find. So we really focus on getting the right coaches who want to do this full-time for a living. They're not bartending at night or trying to, sell insurance and do this on the side, or worse yet, you're just giving them a free membership to show up and coach. Like, that's all my competitors. That is not what we do. We have full-time people, world-class coaches.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.